this is John chapter 7 in a way is a much drier chapter. I'm not going to be going through all of it. But it definitely is covering this idea of timing. So the Bible portrays this larger picture when it comes to the timing and significance of when Jesus shows up in time, which is really significant for us right now. It's really important to understand the significance of when and where Jesus showed up, as right now one of the big questions that's being posed to Christians, and especially young people, is why did the God of the Old Testament allow certain things to happen? And it's good to know how to answer this question and talk about that God didn't want those things to happen. It never was God's intention. To fix the problem, he had a solution named Jesus, and he was setting up this perfect time and this perfect stage for Jesus to show up and save the most people. And there's a lot of area in that where I'm very open to say I don't know how it's all going to play out. That's just what the Bible seems to portray. That there's this river of what God is doing, or this path of what God is doing in the world, and he is active and he is moving. And in the Old Testament, a lot of that was leading to Jesus coming. Jesus was going to come and be the solution. And now a lot of it is us sharing Jesus, is the current of what Jesus is doing. Now what's hard for us is that God's timing is rough when we are in the moment of what's going on. We regularly don't enjoy the moment we're in as we wait on God. I was leading a mission trip with a number of young, there was half the team was teens and half the team were young adults, and we missed a flight. And I was having conversations with God, very much like in Psalms, where David tells God, hey, where are you? What are you doing right now? And the hardest point in that whole thing was we had found a way to get back to our main flight out of Texas, where we would start heading to Africa together, but we were going to have to split up. And I was with the minors and the other leaders with the young adults, and we had to take two separate planes. And I was on the tarmac, and we were on our plane. We were heading to the Texas, where we were going to catch our final international flight. They were about to get on their flight, as far as I knew, but we were on the tarmac, and I got this notification on my phone that their flight got canceled. And I don't know if you know, but as soon as the plane starts to take off, there's nothing you can do. And all I could do was kind of text one of the moms who was someone who works in the travel industry and say, this is what's going on. And her kid would want them, your kid's flight just got canceled. There's nothing I can do. Help me. And I wasn't happy with God again, and I spent that entire flight in prayer. God has this way, though, of showing us down the road sometimes of why he does things the way he does. So what happened for us is we had a wonderful trip, and we got to the end of it, and we had something else a couple things that went wrong. There was a young lady that got sick in Dubai, and they wanted to keep her in Dubai, and I was like, I can't leave a teenager in Dubai. I'm sorry, that's just not going to happen. And had to really stick my heels in. But when we got back to Seattle, and one of the young lady's bags wasn't in the right spot. All of our other bags showed up at the right baggage claim, but they said her bag is all the way over there. And we had to go all the way through Seattle to a different section of the airport to get her bag. And we were tired, we were exhausted, we were frustrated. I was trying to just keep everyone calm. I was just excited we were back in the States and everyone was alive and had 10 fingers and 10 toes at that point. But we got back to the baggage claim where her bag was at, and it was where we showed up at the airport at first, and our first flight was missed, and I was stuck, and I just felt at my lowest as a leader. And I found out that the biggest thing was God was trying to get a hold of me through that whole trip. That sure, he was working on I was thinking about all the young people and the leaders I was bringing with, like God's going to do great things with these folks. Fantastic. God was at the end of that trip saying, actually, you are also someone I was trying to get a hold of. Because you think you can plan all this stuff, and you know all this stuff, and then everything's going to go your way. And I wanted to let you know that I'm actually in control. And since then, I do my best on mission trips, but I've had to tell people, pray. Please pray. Because there's so much that can go wrong. And even on my last one this summer, something went wrong, and all I had to do was tell everyone, pray. So Jesus, well, starting in verse 1 here of chapter 7, the first group of people that are unhappy with his timing is his own family. After this, Jesus went around in Galilee. He did not want to go about in Judea because the Jewish leaders there were looking for a way to kill him. But when the Jewish festival of tabernacles was near, Jesus' brothers said to him, leave Galilee and go to Judea so that your disciples there may see the works you do. No one who wants to become a public figure acts in secret. Since you are doing these things, show yourself to the world. For even his own brothers did not believe in him. Therefore Jesus told them, my time is not yet here. For you, any time will do. The world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testified that its works are evil. You go to the festival. I am not going up to the festival because my time has not yet fully come. After he had said this, he stayed in Galilee. Now this is a similar conversation that Jesus had to have with his mother in the wedding in Cana in chapter 2. She says, need you to make wine. He says, it's not my time. And then she just tells the servants, just do whatever he tells you. But this isn't the only time we know that Jesus' family doesn't understand who he is or what he has come to do. We know from other healing accounts that his family shows up and says it's time for Jesus to come home. He's lost. He's not doing what he's supposed to be doing. He's the firstborn son, and as far as we know, Joseph is no longer around when he starts his ministry. In Mark, we know that there's a brief mention of him setting up his family in Galilee, and then he starts his ministry. But culturally, he's supposed to be the head of household. He's the one who's supposed to be keeping things going. And maybe it was that they were supportive up to a point. But we have to remember that last week, after he fed 5,000 or more people and did this huge miracle, and then they came back, he worked really hard to make them all leave. He first said, well, if you want to be saved, all you have to do is become a cannibal. Eat flesh and drink blood. And a lot of them said, we can't do this. And then he went even further with some of them until a large amount of the crowd left. And to his brothers, they're saying, you're supposed to be a public figure. Time's up. It's time for you to fulfill that role or come home and fulfill the role you're supposed to do. James, the author of the book of James, is most likely in this group of brothers who has come to get him to come home or do what he's supposed to do. But Jesus' response is what's important here. He says, my time has not yet come. But what he's really trying to, what we find out is that Jesus actually goes through the back to the festival. What he's really trying to let his brothers know is your idea of me isn't right. Because your idea of me and what I should be doing and when I should be doing it is what's the problem here. I'm coming to do something that you don't quite understand. And the thing we have to understand, the key insight that we're supposed to grasp at, is that God's timing is better than ours. I'm reluctant to say that God's timing is perfect because I feel like that word is so large that sometimes people really don't feel that way. The world is by far not perfect. But we have to come to terms and finally say that God's timing is better than our timing. God's plan is better than our plan, even when it doesn't feel like it in the moment. We should also know that it is okay to be impatient with God as long as you are willing to track with God. The Bible has lots of people that were impatient with God and his timing and how he did things. God didn't take one of them and smite them. No, none of them were struck down by lightning because they were impatient with God or unhappy with how God was making things happen. Most of the Psalms are David telling God he's not happy with how God is doing things. But he always ends it respectfully saying, but you are God. You are the one who is in control. God says, I understand that you're impatient and you don't understand, but please track with me. Please wait so I can show you. The theological term for all of this time is called kairos, which is that there's an opportune time that God has put in place for things to happen. And I think that we have to look inward and say there was an opportune time when our hearts, individually, were ready for God to speak to us. That people had tried to get a hold of us, people had talked to us, really impressive people had talked to us, really impressive people had been good Christians around us. But it wasn't until the opportune moment in our hearts when we were ready to receive the Lord ourselves. God is working towards those times in people's lives. We, unfortunately, would rather it happen on our time and not his. We often want things on our schedule, but God has a better plan, a better schedule. With Micah, our son, I don't know if you know, but Katie and I are 43, and Micah is 3. And that's what you, of course, give on the 19th wedding anniversary, is the opportunity to start over. Katie and I had, when we moved to McKenzie Bridge and started our ministry there and moved into the parsonage, our plan was that we were going to have kids when I was done with seminary. And then we were in the house and we're like, man, we're in this really big parsonage. We're just rattling around in here. We got a dog, and that didn't fill the space, just made it smell worse. So we said, well, we've been foster parents. Maybe we should start doing that again. We'll become foster parents and fill these rooms with kids. And that was sped up by the fact that there was a grandmother in the church that was taking care of her grandkids, but she was injured, and DHS said, well, we're going to have to take these kids. And so we got ourselves ready right quick to receive those grandkids. They didn't stay very long, but then after that, we were on DHS's radar, and they said, we have 3 more for you. And we had only done toddlers up to that point. They said, we have 3 girls. One of them is a toddler, and then we have a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old. We had never done kids that old. We were pretty reluctant, and they said, well, I don't know if anyone here, I know we have some foster parents in the room. They said it's going to be 3 months tops. Pretty sure they're going to go back to mom and dad 3 months. Well, they are now our daughters, and they are now adults and out on their own, doing their own thing. But Micah showed up way later, and we had tried to have our own kids, and we hadn't really been succeeding. I think we, in a way, kind of given up. And the story that we like to tell about Micah's arrival is that Katie's mom passed away in 2020, and she went to heaven and she told God, all right, it's time. I want Katie to have a kid. But in a lot of ways, Micah's arrival for us kind of came at a time where we needed him. We needed him in our lives. I feel like Micah's smile is one of the things that keeps me going through some of the really dark stuff that's happened over the past 3 years. Some of the hard decisions we've had to make, as well as how we were going to be able to pay for Micah. I had just reached the status at the school where I got paternity leave and was able to go home and stay with Katie and Micah and have it paid for. And there were complications with Micah's birth. And I had both insurance through the school and OHP, and they said, you guys can stay here as long as you want on this good insurance, which isn't the case for everyone. God was letting us know, I'm here in the midst of this, even though you guys may not feel like I'm doing this in the way or in the order you want. We can't wait to be at his first kindergarten class, and the teacher will know us, but we always thought when we take Micah to go to be in kindergarten, they're going to be like, oh, it's so nice his grandparents brought him. Our grandson is 1 year younger than him, okay? But Jesus sneaks to the Feast of Tabernacles anyway. Jumping to verse 14, going to verse 24. Not until halfway through the festival did Jesus go up to the temple courts and began to teach. The Jews there were amazed and asked, how did this man get such learning without being taught? Jesus answered, my teaching is not my own. It comes from the one who sent me. Anyone who chooses to do the will of God will find out whether my teaching comes from God or whether I speak on my own. Whoever speaks on their own does not gain personal glory. But he who speaks the glory of the one who sent him is a man of truth. There is nothing false about him. Has not Moses given you the law? Yet not one of you keeps the law. Why are you trying to kill me? They responded, Are you demon possessed? The crowd answered. Who is trying to kill you? Jesus said to them, I did one miracle, and you were all amazed. Yet because Moses gave you circumcision, though it actually did not come from Moses, but from the patriarchs, you circumcised a boy on the Sabbath. Now if a boy can be circumcised on the Sabbath, so that the law of Moses may be broken, why are you angry with me for healing a man's whole body on the Sabbath? Stop judging by mere appearances, but instead judge correctly. So in this middle section where Jesus is teaching about timing, that John is remembering Jesus teaching about timing, he talks about how they're upset with the timing of what Jesus did in this miracle. They're impressed by him, but they're not quite sure if they can accept him. And Jesus is trying to get them to understand that he's not going to fit in the box that they keep on trying to put him into. They are unhappy that at the pool where the man was waiting for the angels to stir the water so he could be healed, that Jesus told him to pick up his mat and walk, because he broke one of the 39 Sabbath laws. And Jesus brings up this example. He says, you are okay with performing a circumcision on a boy on the Sabbath because that's the day it needs to be happening. And that's because this has been a tradition that's been handed down by Moses. But you have a problem with me healing someone's entire body, which is way less of a destructive action. And they are astonished by the authority of his teachings and what he is opening their minds to. And they are beginning to see that he is different. And that's the reason why Jesus could not go and do what the brothers wanted. He needed to be something different. They wanted him. They basically already said, we want you to go and run for public office. And we already know how that's supposed to go. Go kiss some babies, shake some hands, make some promises you don't plan to fulfill. Go and make the people happy. And he says, actually, I'm going to be something way bigger than this current time, this current place. And I'm going to help so many more people than just the people that are here. Sometimes we need to think about the timing of what we are doing, though. We need to look at the Israelites because the Israelites are us. We are the continuation of that family. We've been adopted by God as his children. And sometimes we need to think about, what are we getting hung up on that is a tradition that we've been keeping for a long time, but it's actually getting in the way of people that need to be served, like that man that needed to be healed. One of the things that I have noticed as someone who has been around the world as a Christian, as well as a third-generation Christian, is that often I've noticed that in America, as a Christian movement, we are unaware of what we do in the negative space of our actions and attitudes. And that's what Jesus is trying to point out in this situation, is that by saying what I did was bad, but this is okay, you don't understand what you're saying in the negative space about God and his character. Sometimes we prioritize traditional worship styles or dress codes And we do that over the importance of community needs or needs of just the people in the room. In South Africa, they came up with a whole uniform system that women had to wear, and it was not an attractive uniform. And the amount of time and focus they spent on it, I felt like my dad had to bring it up constantly. Like, we spend so much time talking about these uniforms, and it really isn't addressing the inside of the cup, the inside of the tomb. It's a nice outside, but it's not a good inside. There are churches that still fight over which day is the best day to worship. Now, this billboard isn't up there anymore, but right outside of Albany for a long time, there was a church whose denomination will go unmentioned, but they were spending money monthly to let everyone know that they worship God on the right day. And I remember driving by this. I think my oldest was just started college, and I had to keep driving to Portland over and over again. But I kept running, seeing this sign, thinking, that's an interesting use of money. Just to let people know that you were doing it the right way. And I almost wanted to stop by one day and have people started coming to church because you let them know that you're doing it on the right day. I'm guessing it did not. I'm guessing no one ever showed up to church because they did it supposedly on the right day. But that's what they were spending their money on. That's how they were putting themselves out there. Jesus' teachings challenge us to place compassion on a much larger level and our caring about others above anything else in this world, even our own rigid traditions. But at the same time, Jesus is still following the rhythms that God has put forth. He's showing up for the Feast of Tabernacles. He shows up for Passover. He goes to the synagogue. Jesus continues to do the things he is expected to do. He is living up to God's charge. He's being faithful, but at the same time, he is calling out things that need to be called out within it. He teaches with his authority, and because of this, the crowd is divided. Whenever we stand up for what's right, the crowd will be divided. Some marvel at his wisdom, others question his origins. They bring up the fact of where he came from again, like, how could he be this great? He comes from this place. In my old community, there was one town that definitely had this aura, this mantle that was put out of it. Nothing good was going on there. And the Pharisees, though, they want Jesus to start to go away. They want him gone. So they send guards that day to arrest him, but it doesn't go very well for them. Verse 32 through 49. The Pharisees heard the crowd whispering such things about him. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees sent temple guards to arrest him. Jesus said, I am with you for only a short time. Then I am going to the one who sent me. You will look for me, but you will not find me. And where I am, you cannot come. Finally, the temple guards went back to the chief priests and the Pharisees, who asked them, why didn't you bring him in? No one ever spoke the way this man does, the guards replied. You mean he has deceived you also, the Pharisees retorted. Have any of the rulers of the Pharisees believed in him? No. But this mob that knows nothing of the law, there is a curse on them. So the Pharisees send guards, and they come back with a response of, he was too impressive. No one has spoken a way that touches our hearts quite like this Jesus. Even those who have been given the task to shut him down become witnesses to his authority. They're so impressed by his teaching. Jesus' words have a profound impact even on those who oppose him. As I am someone who is really trying to seek out non-believers, one of the things that I've noticed is that the number one thing that's usually under attack right now in America is not Jesus. It's the church. People don't like the church. They don't like what the church has done or is doing. A lot of it is their ideas of what the church is and what the church is doing. A lot of them I don't think have been in church in a long time, but I've noticed that not many of them have anything bad to say about Jesus. They still kind of like Jesus. They'll often say, we like Jesus, we just like Christians to be more like him. Because Jesus is someone that has always been able to speak in a way that impresses people and touches their hearts. Jesus often challenges their assumptions and our assumptions, their status quo and our status quo. The hard thing is trying to get Jesus to people. And they may be open to his truth if they are ready. The only thing that we can do is keep on offering that truth. And when we covered the woman at the well, one of the things I talked about is that Jesus would share the truth with her, and we were talking about how we don't get to control how that plays out. And this is very true that in chapter 3, there was a Pharisee that Jesus also had a conversation with named Nicodemus. And he shows up at the tail end of this chapter. And Jesus has told him the truth about who he is and what he's come to do. But it ends with this conversation with him and Nicodemus, and it just seems like it ends. We don't know what happens. There's no conclusion. Jesus has just told him, this is who I am, this is what I've come to do, this is what I stand for, and we have no conclusion from Nicodemus. But here in chapter 7, Nicodemus enters the conversation again in verse 50. Nicodemus, who had gone to Jesus earlier and who was one of their own numbers, asked, "Does our law condemn a man without first hearing him to find out what he has been doing?" They replied to him, "Are you from Galilee too?" I guess this is an insult. "Look into it, and you will find that a prophet does not come out of Galilee." Amid the Pharisaical hostility, Nicodemus asks, "Does our law judge fairly before a hearing?" Nicodemus is someone that's had the truth put into him, and now he's starting to question the thing that he's been a part of his entire life. He's someone that started as a Jewish boy that went to learn the Torah, and then he continued on after age 13 and continued to learn even more and became a Pharisee, and now he's someone that's enforcing the law. He's learned it since he was a young boy of 5 or 6. And now he's starting to ask questions. He's starting to say, is this really who we are? Is this really what we stand for? And then they have this backlash against him saying, "You must be from that horrible town too." He has this courageous curiosity from within the system that he grew up in. And a lot of times when it comes to timing, when we are going out and sharing Jesus with others, just like with Nicodemus, we don't know when that seed is going to sprout and grow leaves and begin to flower. But God does. God is that master gardener who's been working with Nicodemus this whole time. And Nicodemus is beginning to question what's been going on around him with the Pharisees. Following Jesus sometimes demands gentleness and boldness, even from unlikely places. I am encouraged to say that there are a number of young adults that I have been seeing courageously saying, "We found out that Jesus is the truth," and they're now reaching out for people to help them. And that's really exciting. And that comes from them watching the world around them, but someone has planted that seed and been the mediator between God and them. And now there's lots of people in their lives who are coming on and saying, "How can we help you?" But even those who are curious can face opposition. The people that are taking on the system that they grew up in, like Nicodemus, if they were an unbeliever and they grew up in an unbelieving family and they decided to follow Jesus, they face the same type of opposition, and it takes courage and strength. And we are asked to just be there along with them in that. and helping them, being an ear for them, being a shoulder, being a hand to hold, to pray with, whatever it helps so that God can continue to grow them as a gardener. The central message in all of this is the identity of who Jesus is. The crowd is divided over who Jesus is. Some believe, some doubt. And doubt is an okay feeling for people to have, because doubt is possibly there's a seed and it's trying to break through rocks or break through whatever is going on in their life. I feel like doubt sometimes in the Christian realm is turned into a swear word, but there were lots of people in the Bible who doubted. Not just Thomas, I promise. Jesus reveals himself not just as a teacher, but as the source of living water and spiritual truth for people. He needed to be more than what his brothers wanted. He needed to be more than what his mother wanted. He needed to be more than what society or his disciples wanted him to be. He needed to be what we all needed. And then will we follow, even when it disrupts our comfort? And will we judge rightly or judge by appearances? Jesus is challenging the crowd, but he's also challenging us. And the same questions about Jesus' identity persist all the way today. Nothing has really changed. Are we willing to accept him fully, even when it's challenging? Are we willing to wait on his timing? Jesus' ministry showed up at the perfect time and the perfect place. The tension of following him often means standing firm even when it's difficult. Like Nicodemus, we're called to seek him out and speak for truth. When I think about Nicodemus, one of the big things I think about is my calling, because I came back to the United States, a missionary kid, grew up in the church, and a lot of people think that I just bought in, like right away. I definitely, but honestly, there was a moment in time where I was ready to jettison the church behind me. And luckily, I had a grandmother. I don't know if anyone else has these wonderful grandmothers. I feel like Anne, who's not here, is like everyone's grandma. But my grandmother said, when are we picking you up for church? We want you to come over for lunch after church. And she took us to church, and she said, I want to introduce you to the campus ministry guy at our church. And then he started calling me and says, when can I pick you up Thursday for fellowship? And then sometimes I'd be, oh, you don't have to come. I'm all the way out here. You don't have to come get me. He's like, oh, no problem. I'll come get you. And even as I began to go to church and gave my life to Jesus, there were still these parts of my life that I was not letting God in. And I remember at the church in question with my grandmother took me to, there was one Sunday where I gave a communion meditation, and the pastor and one of the associate pastors said, that was so great, you should go into ministry. I was like, no, I'm not. I'm not going into ministry. And I fought off ministry for a long, long time. I was going to go work in television or in movies, or I was doing my own thing. My dad did that, my grandfather did that, I'm not doing that. But in his time, God worked on me and worked on me in a way where I was ready. I was ready. I think what's hard for us is we all know someone else that we're hoping comes around like we did. I have kids that I'm hoping will come around like he did. I try my best not to control that scenario. It's hard as a parent. You always want to give your 5 cents, 2 cents, or a whole $10,000. But it's hard for us. But we have to trust that Jesus knows what to do. He knows how to reach them. Let's end in prayer. Lord, I'm so grateful that in your time you reached each of us here in this room. It's hard for us when we're in the moment and it doesn't seem like it's fair. It doesn't seem like it's the best idea. We feel like we could have managed it better. Lord, I pray that you would humble us so that we would turn to you, and even if it's just patiently waiting to see how you can move during this time, and that you can do all things for your glory, even though we don't know how yet. And Lord, I pray that as we go out this week, that we would not worry about succeeding or doing anything great, that we would just be faithful and speak the truth in love, and that we would just have your Spirit with us wherever we go, and trust that you are the gardener, that you know how to know when someone is ripe and ready. And Lord, all we pray is that we would be good mediaries for those people. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.